Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to Life Excellence. Please support the show by subscribing, sharing it on social media, posting about it, and leaving a rating and review. You can also learn more about me at BrianBartes.com. I'm so excited to have Aditya Gupta on the show today. Aditya is the owner of several highly successful export, retail, e commerce, and construction businesses in India. His companies employ over 5,000 people, and their products are sold in 85 countries on all 7 continents of the world. In addition to his business endeavors, Aditya is also a TEDx speaker, a fearless adventurer, as you'll find out, a photographer, author, designer, and world traveler. He clearly lives life to the fullest and is very passionate about setting and achieving huge, audacious goals. Aditya believes in raising the bar and did that quite literally by climbing Mount Everest in 2019 at the age of 50. He documented his adventure in a beautiful coffee table book entitled 7 Lessons from Everest. This 231-page book takes readers through an immersive photo journey to the summit of Everest and also empowers readers with profound lessons that can be applied to any challenges in business and in life. All proceeds from his book go to Child Rights in You, the acronym is CRY, a non government organization in India that works tirelessly to ensure happier and healthier childhoods for India's underprivileged children. Aditya also helped design Mission Everest, a virtual simulation of his summit climb. This simulation has become a highly effective tool for management training and performance transformation. Aditya has been featured in television, countless magazines, and newspapers, all documenting his incredible journey up Everest. He insists that Everest is just a metaphor for any challenging goals you want to achieve, and his talks leave audiences feeling charged up and inspired to climb their own versions of Mount Everest. Aditya, I am so charged up for this interview. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Lovely to be here, Brian. Thank you very much for an extremely generous introduction. I'm excited to talk to you and to talk to your listeners and to just find, new people who are interested in this story. So let's get
I
started.
All right. I definitely want to talk about Everest, and I love the metaphor between climbing Mount Everest and achieving big goals in life. And certainly we're going to get into that. But I have to tell you, I'm equally fascinated by your business background. So let's go all the way back to your education and the start of Sharda Exports. Your educational background is actually in mechanical engineering. How did you shift from mechanical engineering into business and starting Sharda Exports, and tell us about that business?
So after engineering, I did business school. So straight after engineering, I went to the Delhi University Faculty of Management Studies, where I did business specializing in marketing. We were fortunate that our parents had actually started a very small rug business at our family home. So we grew up seeing rugs being made around us. Our family home was a large compound because there were some other things happening out there, the cold storage and all of those things. So as soon as we finished education, choice was to go either for a corporate career. I had job offers from American Express and so on, but I was more excited about following my own path. And I think one of the conversations, so me and my mom used to have these post dinner walks, like long walks after dinner. And one of those conversations, our business was very, very small at that time. So I was seriously considering taking a corporate job offer because I had good education and there were a lot of good offers that I had. So my mom in that conversation said that, I want you to be somebody who gives jobs, not takes jobs. So I think that was a little bit of a little nudge to that 21-year-old chap who said, okay, let's take it that way. And me and my younger brother kind of took over from our parents, and took over in the sense that, our dad and our mom, they were like, okay, you guys do it your way because it's your way of working and our way of working is different. We are around if you need us. But they were not always like standing next to us or something, right? So we had full freedom from day one, literally from day one. And I'm sure we did not disappoint them. it was good for us at that point because typically the rug manufacturers out of India were very traditional companies, and we were modern, educated folks, young kids who looked at it as a home fashion business, and we never looked at it as a rug manufacturing business, right? So our customer profile, our approach to business was a very different approach than a traditional rug manufacturing company out of India, and I think that helped. So over the next 7 years, me and my brother grew our business 100 times.
Oh my
you know
goodness.
it, it is still a old fashioned handmade stuff, so it's not like today's times you get fundings of millions of dollars and you do something magical, and in 2 years you are like 5,000 times bigger. So these are traditional businesses with everything being proportionally required. So 100 times means 100 times more area, 100 times more people, 100 times more customers. So all of that was exciting. And then as we grew and as we, sort of understood the global market, and as our finances went on stronger, so we diversified into other things. And real estate was one of them. Furniture manufacturing and export was one of them, and it's been a very very fun journey. And I am really thankful to my parents, uh, to everybody else around us, to my family, to my children, my wife. And it's been a great learning experience and an exciting journey so far. Of course we've had our ups and downs, like we should. I always say that if you're not having any trouble, that means you're underselling yourself. You're just operating in your comfort zone. You should be having some problems in life and some problems in business, because otherwise you are too much inside the boundary. So I think we've
Sure.
had our fair share and we've had fun.
Your journey is incredible, and we could really talk the whole time about business. You're involved in so many businesses, and that side fascinates me. And actually, even as we get into Everest, I'm going to ask more questions about how you balance those. But let's stick on business for a short time. So you grew Sharda Imports, and you talked about the magnitude of that growth, and you talked about some other businesses that you've gotten into. And in learning about you, I read that over the last 10 years, you've branched into many other endeavors. You mentioned a couple of them, the commercial building construction projects, the retail business with the Furniture Republic, but you also started an e-commerce website, and interestingly, even got into some real seemingly unrelated businesses like futures and options trading, financial investing. My question is, how are you able to manage so many businesses?
I think I am lucky to have a good team and a good management system in our core business, which is manufacturing and export. And I, as a founder of that business, and I think as a person individually, I like to sort of not keep on doing the same thing. So if there is enough stability in what has been established, then it's fun to move on to something related. I try and avoid taking monumental risks. I think I believe a little bit in that piggy bank model of wealth creation and wealth generation. So as I said, we are a generation before the funding, and literally when we did our education, there was almost no email and hardly any, all of those things. So we still have that good merger of conservative on our side and then very modern on the market side. So our exposure in terms of global travel, global brands, and I think the futures and options and financial investing, naturally as you generate and you create a wealth portfolio, it is important to be able to pay attention to that. And it's not that you're so busy running your businesses that you don't even pay attention to the result of those businesses, which in our case in privately held companies naturally is some kind of wealth creation, and that has to be managed well and has to help us grow further. And also I like to distribute them into two three different boxes. So some boxes give us the security, and some boxes more risk money. So it's a little bit of a conservative approach, but works well for us so far.
It's interesting to me that you tell me you're risk averse, yet you're involved in futures and options trading, and you climb Mount Everest. How do you
No, I did not
the
say
two
risk averse. I
incongruent?
said balancing the risk. I did not say I'm risk averse, but what I meant was that I don't want to take a $500 million project, in which case it becomes a larger number than I should be entering into a single project. So I love risk to the extent that I feel is manageable, As far as Everest, I am a firm believer that life and death, I'm not so much of a fatalistic sort of chap, but I do believe that life and death is a little bit, on your destiny. And I have seen enough examples of that from my personal life, where the healthiest of people pass away for no reason, and the most unhealthy lifestyle people still continue to, do whatever they do, and nothing happens to them. So Everest, etc., is for me. I am a believer that if my days are numbered, then so are they. And business, I try to divide the risk into different baskets. So individually, I may take a risky basket, but that will still be manageable in my overall scheme of things. You know what I mean? So if you're worth 100 and you have 25 on a risky endeavor, then that's okay.
Totally makes sense, and I
But
appreciate
if
that
I would take a
honesty.
risk of
Yeah,
500 while being 100, then that would be the kind of risk I would not take. But that does not mean I
yes.
would do boring things.
Clearly not, and we'll get into one of those non-boring adventures in a couple minutes. Aditya, you wrote that environmental and social responsibility has been in your organization's DNA before it really became a buzzword. Can you share more about that and how that is woven, pun unintended, woven throughout your organization, and why social responsibility and sustainability is so important to you?
So I'll tell you what. So this is a part of my education while being a global business person. And as I said to you in the beginning, because we were a modern company running as a home fashion business, we had a different customer profile when we got into the business in early 90s. So while typically most of the exporters would sell to wholesale companies who would then sell to retailers across the globe, our customer base tended to be brands and nice, important brands and retail folks around the world. So with them, with the exposure with them was a lot around audits, and that whole culture of being environmentally conscious, I think I imbibed from my global business exposure and global travels, because we were meeting and interacting with a different profile of people as compared to a typical industry situation. So that was partly it, partly because of our A class education and just the reading, and a part of our family sort of, what should I say, our family has been a little conscious, especially socially and on the philanthropy side. And the environmental consciousness came more around my engineering background and the business school and the traveling and the working with the important brands in the world, who kind of made our consciousness to a level where we realize that it's actually profitable to align with those causes. We never looked upon it as a cost of doing business or some sort of a liability to be, kind of fulfilled. But there were advantages, and I think we've always benefited from them. Firstly, directly because a lot of customers appreciate that about us, and we work with the most important brands in the world in across markets. And indirectly because our work environment, our internal, I think an important phrase to me is the stories that you tell yourself about yourself. They matter a lot in life. And if my story to myself is that I am doing business ethically, I'm doing the right things for my people, I'm doing the right things for my environment, I think that gives me a more positive frame of mind with which I view the world and view my business enterprise. So I think between these two factors, we've had that experience right from like the mid 90s, and we are pretty much the first company who started doing a lot of recycled products. So starting from sweaters and jeans and ties and all kinds of things. So we had that advantage of being innovative while being kind of creative, as well as very very, what should I say, home fashion oriented, but being out of the box. So our company in the trade has always been known for its creativity.
How how does that permeate throughout the organization? So I can see that this is clearly an organizational value for you. How does it play out on a day-to-day basis or year in year out basis? Not just at the management level, but also throughout your organization. Is this something that you talk about? and obviously you're living that value. So I'm just curious about how that plays out
So I
for
will tell you the most
everybody.
important thing. So for me, it's important to measure outputs. It's important to measure these things. It's not only important to talk about something unless it's measured, acknowledged and rewarded. Things don't really permeate into practice. So we have in our company an elaborate system of incentives and variable pays, and those systems. For example, I'll give you something. For example, all our waste materials that we can sell for a recycling purpose, that money is put back into facilities for staff. So whether it's a new machine in the lunchroom or some extra stuff happening purely for the comfort and convenience of staff. So that becomes, let's say if I'm selling $50,000 worth of stuff from the factory, which instead of being just thrown away into a waste or something, it gets collected, segregated. So there is an effort involved in that. And that quantification, we've kept that quantification mentality to a fairly detailed level, where everybody naturally not only can see this is happening, but the benefits of that are coming directly or indirectly to the larger group. It's not only coming to me as an owner. And
Right.
besides of that, obviously, because we go through so many audits and we have so many certifications, like we are a global recycling standard certified company, we are ISO, we are environmental, we are all kinds of, because of the branding and because of the way we like to do business. So that is also included. So therefore, a lot of that data, a lot of those practices are a part of these audits, and then these benefits which we share with our people through innovative ideas and through schemes of how to do things. For example, all our savings on diesel and electricity are 10% of that saving goes back to the teams that manage it.
Hmm.
And every year we've been saving, six-figure dollar sums. And it's surprising that how this is now third year running, and every year we still have a lot more saving to be done. Now that couldn't be possible if there was no incentive link, because I'm not walking around all our factories switching off lights and fans, but somebody is made aware of that and is rewarded for that effort. On the one hand it's cost saving, on the other hand it's environmental support. So these are the kind of
So
examples.
yeah, so awareness and visibility are obviously very big, and then I love how you transfer the benefit of that back to the stakeholders, the people who are responsible for turning off the lights or other
I think
environmentally
that is,
friendly.
Brian, we take that into a lot of detail into different aspects of our business. And I think partly that is the reason, while you asked me in the beginning, how can you manage so many different things? I think if the incentives that I have as an owner and as the people have as associates, if they're aligned, then I have to monitor much less number of things. Otherwise you can keep saying things and you can keep monitoring and keep, how much watch can you keep? There has to be an incentive which is aligned, and then people just take care of it without you having to all the time look into it, or look over somebody else's shoulders for every little thing. So I can concentrate on either diversification or new projects or even some adventures. I can take off for a couple of weeks and I'm very comfortable mentally that I know things will be fine.
Yeah. How do you describe your leadership style? So you're managing by numbers if you're measuring things, and so that's one aspect of it. But talk about other things that you do to lead effectively in your organization.
So I would say that it is a amalgamation of two or three different styles, because there are very different kind of audiences that I have to manage. So on the worker level, we are in the handmade product business. So there is a very different kind of craftsmen, people who are not so educated. That is where a lot more, what should I say, it's like you have to be a little bit of a senior family figure. So we have a lot of policy oriented things. For example, anybody who's worked in our company for more than 3 years can at any time take a loan for 4 months of their salary for, without any, you just have to put in a little note and they can take the money. So that saves them, because some of these people are not so well versed with the banking system. And if they go to the unorganized lending system in India, people could be paying 5% per month as financing cost. So there are these things which we do at the worker and labor level where they feel a part. So we pay for the children's education, we pay for a lot of different activities. Like, for example, with COVID last year, we had everybody, even those people who were contractors and outside folks, we bought health insurance for everybody. We took care of everybody to make sure that if somebody has any issues, money was on the hose. So that is a little bit of a sort of a family situation where it's not so policy driven but a very personal. There are people who have literally come the whole journey with me, people who I know for 30 years, and they're still making rugs for us. Maybe they were workers and now they became supervisors. So some of those people I know by name. I may not know somebody who joined us 2 years ago, but I definitely know everybody who was 20 years ago in the company.
Yes.
So that is that part of it. Then there is the senior folks who are our leaders and people, team leaders. So they are, most of our team leaders are more than 15 years with the company. So that makes a huge difference to the amount of trust that we have. So that's where the numbers and the incentive models come in. And then there is the middle part where the junior management people who come and go, they work for a couple of years. And so that is where we keep a lot more policy driven and systems driven approach to various things. And we have a detailed model of, as I said, variable pay. So up to 30% of salary can be earned as bonuses on a monthly basis. So to that
Wow.
extent, there is an elaborate system of numbers and incentives. But over and above, depending on the need of the situation, we can have approach which can be family oriented, or sometimes also a little disciplinarian, because things have to be sometimes just put in perspective. We are in the export business. There is very little tolerance for not meeting our deadlines or our quality standards or anything else. So we operate in an environment which is different. Like, our market environment is very different from our immediate environment, in India, and especially in our business, which is a smaller town in India. So things can be a little more flexible out here, but on our customer side there is very little flexibility in terms of just standards and expectations. So we have got to manage that dichotomy. And I think we do it well by a system of incentives, and where required, also pressures.
Well, it sounds like you do it very well, and I love to hear about it. Like I said, we could just have this podcast be entirely about your businesses, and maybe we
In
can
fact, I am
visit them
writing a book
individually.
about it. I am writing another book which is about managing small businesses, because I feel that a lot of the content in business schools, and I went to business school, and so many of my friends, even my children, are studying, and both my kids were in UCLA. So they've kind of graduated from UCLA, and I see. So a lot of that is for large corporates or sometimes very startup kind of things. But regular businesses, between that 10 million to $100 million sort of level, there's very little content which has come from practical people who are running those businesses. Either they're professors or folks who are, whoever from the corporate world. So I thought that there should be some content for practices which have worked for us. So that is my other book in the working. And I think sometime next year I should be out with it, which is purely
Okay.
done to help people. Because I get this a lot, that how do you manage different things and you still have a life outside of your work. And I am the most available of my friends to go out for a trip or a movie or a holiday. Like, I am the most available person. I never say I'm too busy for that, because to me that is a part of joys of life. And if my businesses don't allow me time to enjoy what really means much to me, then in some ways I think I'm becoming, I don't own the businesses then begin to own me. And I don't like that feeling.
Well, and that's all too common. So your book will be very well received and very helpful because it's easy to say the things that you're saying. It's quite another thing to actually live that, as you know. And I'm sure you have lots of friends, and you see examples around the world of people who are sort of chained to their business rather than setting the business up so that they can do exciting things like climb Everest. So we look forward to that book. Aditya, let's shift our conversation now to Everest. We're
Sure.
not going to totally move away from family and life and in business, but we'll integrate that and let's focus on this Everest adventure. The Everest climb takes about 50 days. I think you were about 43 days on the mountain and has a statistical casualty rate of 4%. I read that in 2019, the year that you did the climb, Mount Everest claimed 12 lives. It takes a year of rigorous preparation. You did all of this at the age of 50 while running, like we were talking about, people intensive businesses that require tremendous time, energy, and attention. So you get to the mountain, you get to Everest, and you witness a plane crash even before you start the climb. As you're climbing, you encounter dead bodies along the way and were drained physically, psychologically, and emotionally. You quite literally defied the odds, and on a few occasions, even defied death. So, the obvious first question is why? You have a beautiful family. I spoke with your son. I've seen pictures. You have a blessed life. You have great businesses. Why risk all of that for something like an Everest climb?
Well, it's very hard to explain that to somebody who's not in the same love affair. So I would not even want to try to do that. But I would say that I have been in love with adventure and outdoors right from college. So our engineering college had a club called the Himalayan Explorers Club. And my very first mountain trip was in 1987 as a 17-year-old boy. And since then, I really got hooked to the outdoors and adventures. And I am most charged and most thankful for life when I am out there in nature and wilderness. So gradually, mountains become one of those things. And I did a mountaineering course in 91, 92. So Mount Everest becomes sort of that final frontier of of this love in terms of just what you. So if you are a good swimmer or something, you want an Olympic medal, or at least you want to aspire for one. And then if you can, so fortunately, climbing Mount Everest is not as hard as getting an Olympic medal. So I think I managed the the mountain. I
I
tried
don't know
first.
about that.
So I can tell you about that. And in fact, one of those things, and if you were able to read through my book, that's one of those things I've said in the book, that it was my goal was to prove what ordinary people like me can do when they decide to do it. And Everest, for me, the first attempt I made was in 2014. And that year, the very first night of the climb, an avalanche claimed 16 lives on the Kumbu ice fall. And
Mm.
that year was an aborted season on Everest, because after that, the Sherpas went on. All the people who died were Sherpas. And then the Sherpas went on strike because they could not agree with the Nepalese government about compensation, etc. And it was like we were there for a month, but we had to come back even without starting the actual climb ahead of base camp. So 2019, I turned 50, and I knew that I'm not getting any more young and any more fit to try this. And I thought, okay, let's give it one more shot. But in the meantime, I've been doing adventures every year. So a big serious adventure is a non-negotiable part of my annual calendar. If I'm lucky, sometimes I'm able to do more than one. But one I would definitely like to put in a calendar in advance, and that's it. And then typically it gets done. Unfortunately, after Everest, we've been stuck with the pandemic, and we've not been able to take any extraordinary journeys outside of India. So we are having a good time. I'm paying more attention to India in that case, but it's good fun.
Yeah, what was that like in 2014? So there's a parallel between your preparation for the climb, and as I said, and you agreed, it's about a year lead time to this adventure. And so you go through that entire preparation, you're gearing up physically, you're certainly gearing up mentally and emotionally for that. And then you get to the mountain. And by the way, what a tragic incident. And so I know lives are lost, but I'm not sure, that's probably unparalleled, the number of lives that were lost in that avalanche. That's tragic. But as I heard you describe that, I was thinking about the Olympian, and you referenced the Olympians, and we talked about that a little bit before the show. But I thought about the Olympic athletes who were preparing for Tokyo in 2020 and then had that put off. What is that like to gear up for something that big, to again, not just the physical preparation but the mental and emotional preparation, only to have that suspended? And for you, it wasn't suspended for a year like it has been for the Olympic athletes. In fact, it was 5 years before you got back to the mountain.
And I was not even sure whether I'll ever get back, because I was, to be honest with you, I was a little disappointed. I felt that the abortion of that season that year was not necessary. It is a little bit of a complex dynamic between operators and Sherpas and the Nepalese government. See, end of the day, these agencies are running a business, and everybody has to pay 100% upfront, and nobody's getting any refunds from there, no matter what happens. So you've got hundreds of people who paid millions of these dollars, and if you decide to cancel the season, you can just get away with it. And I think that is what was one of the driving factors, because there's no accountability as such. And most of the people would never really go back to Everest. And initially, I was also quite disappointed, to be honest, because I felt that there wasn't enough sense of, what should I say, responsibility? Should I say accountability? Should I say sensitivity? I am not kidding you, Brian. There were people who had sold their homes to go and climb Everest.
Mm.
So Everest climbing is basically, first of all, you want to be mad enough to climb it. You already asked me the reason, I couldn't give you one. Then you have to have a life which will let you go for about 2 months out of incommunicado. Practically now there's a lot more satellite phones and stuff like that, but let's say it's hard. Then you have to be able to do something which is financially significantly expensive for an activity like this. So you're talking about 60-70 thousand dollars for an Everest climb, which is basically a leisure activity, which can even risk your life. So most of the people who are there are not exactly wealthy people, because again, if you look at stereotypes, business folks and some of the very wealthy folks are not quite into activities like this. There are a few, but not usually. So a lot of people have taken loans, a lot of people have sold property, a lot of people have somehow managed to get money from friends and relatives and family, and still you just send them back home for, if you are on the Everest, it's like you are expecting every year people are, yes, it was a big accident and a big tragedy, but personally I didn't think it warranted cancellation of the season, because the climbers had not even started. So it was more of a political situation, and it worked for them financially. So it was done. So yes, I was disappointed, but then there is only one Mount Everest, and if you want to do it, there is no other way. You have to go through this, and there is no you can have your ideas and feelings about it, but if you got to focus on the main objective. So I was lucky that I could give it one more try, and this time I was successful.
So, as you said, you were successful in 2019. The Everest expedition required, uh, as I mentioned before, tremendous physical, mental, and emotional preparation. How did you prepare for that? Walk us through what that year looked like leading up to it, and circling back to the business part of it. And you answered this a little bit, but how did you balance the other demands of your life, your family and your businesses, for the year leading up to the climb? And I guess you did that twice, right? Because you did it in 14, and then you went through that same exercise again in 2019.
So let me start with the family, because both my mom and my wife would have, and my kids would have a sort of veto power on ideas like this. So if any of those 4 or 5 people, my parents or my wife or two of my children, would have said that you are not going, you're not going to do this, so I might have just cancelled. But me and my wife are together in college, so she knows me from that time that this is a part of who I am, and she's always been very very supportive. In fact, in 2014, both my children, they were young teenagers, and they went with me up to base camp, to sort of see me off. And this time also we have, and one of those lessons in the book also is not about ignoring the risk. It's about making friends with those fears and preparing for them, and dealing with it head on instead of hoping that they'll not happen to you. So I had documented a lot of stuff. I made a detailed will document. I had an open conversation with both my children and my wife about what to do in case I'm not able to return from there. So this was not something which we want to shove under the rug, so that if something was to go wrong, then suddenly they don't know what to do. There was a sort of a acknowledgement of what it is. And because, as I said, my belief is that life and death are a little bit of a destiny issue, which does not mean we start jumping off the roofs. But by and large, you can die in a road accident, in a plane crash, in whatever else. So many things can go wrong.
Sure.
So I can't be restrained too much about doing things which mean enough to me. So that was the family part. The easiest part of the preparation, I would say, is the physical part of it, Brian, because there is a cause and effect relationship. It's very scientific. You put in the exercise, you take care of your nutrition, and you do that with discipline, and you'll get the result. There is not so much of a gray area there if you are honest about what needs to be done. So that I consider to be the easiest part of it. And then the trickiest part, which is also the most important part while you're in the middle of the climb, is the mental preparation and the sort of tenacity of purpose that will, on the one hand, keep you determined, and on the other hand, also be wise enough and agile enough to turn around if that is the need, which is very obvious. And I think, in my assessment, a lot of people who lose their lives, unfortunately, are people who fail to make that decision at the right moment. They push the envelope too hard. Yes, there are accidents, but today, by and large, a lot of people die more out of exhaustion and out of just not being able to cope up with something that they're deliberately trying to do. You don't really fall off the mountain or something. Of course, you can fall into a crevasse or get killed in an avalanche. It can happen. But a lot of the stories are people who die basically because they overdo themselves. So on the one hand, you have to be very very determined to do this, because if you are easily discouraged, then you will probably turn around 5 times a week. But if you are, on the other hand, arrogant about it, or overly gung ho about it, and not willing to take no for an answer, then you can run into extreme trouble out of which there is no more return. So I think that mental preparation, and that, my experience says, that that is not something which you can do in a year. That is not something which you can do by talking to a spiritual guru or reading some books or looking at some videos. So that is your a part of your chemistry, the person that you are, and largely a part of the result of what your life has been. So the smaller adventures, when you say you have to be experienced to go to Mount Everest, I think that experience is mostly because you should be able to understand what is the limit of your body, what is the limit of your mind, how do you react to certain situations. And as I said, the stories that you tell yourself about yourself. So if you have a lot of stories of adventures, and there are things where you were quite close to your mortality and you kind of made it, that gives you an optimistic outlook over several expeditions and several experiences, where you say, okay, you know what, things can go wrong and then they work out themselves. You just have to sort of stick to the purpose. So that's not something which can just be created out of thin air. That has to be a part of your experiences and your mental framework. So therefore, these three parts of the preparation, so something is in works all your year, but obviously your friends and things have to be in and family has to be aligned to the purpose. About the business part, again, as I said, we do have a lot of systems in place. But you know what, I think every owner, every founder has this delusion about how important they are to the business. And the Mount Everest expedition was one of those things which helped me get out of that delusion to some extent, because I was gone for 60 days, practically incommunicado. And I came back and I said to my people, you all did such a wonderful job. Everything is in place. Everything is going well. You don't really need me around that much. So I actually cut down some of my engagement from the business after that, because sometimes you have to leave your hands off the handle and you see you are balancing okay. Sometimes you don't do that because the purpose, the circumstances never present themselves. But this
I
was a
know
very
some
very good thing.
I know sometimes leaders leave and undertake, whether it's a vacation or an adventure like the one that you were on, and they come back and find that the business is running better than ever. And that's a little bit of a mixed blessing, right? For you, it's wonderful, and it means that the systems and processes that you've set up work. And for some people, they feel a little threatened by that because they realize that they aren't as important to the business as maybe they thought they were, or maybe other people thought they were, right?
And I think my personal experience out of that, Brian, was that when people know that they really, really are responsible for it, and the guy on top is no longer around, nobody is watching, there is nobody who will catch the ball if they drop the ball, I think they just become better than usual. So when I'm around, the same people may be a little more, forgiving, of circumstances, because they know somebody is going to manage, and things are in place in terms of just the monitoring systems. But I think everybody becomes more responsible in their own way when they know that somebody is actually going and trying to climb Everest. So that's a little bit of their own contribution to my client by taking such good care of their responsibility, that I don't need to worry about it while I'm there. I don't need to worry about it immediately upon my return. I think there is a difference between you going for a holiday to Europe versus going to climb Mount Everest. I think people take it differently. And I have
Sure.
seen that difference very often. And I am blessed to have that kind of team, and also to have that experience, that how these two kinds of differences of absence, they work.
It's interesting that you talked about the contribution that people in your organization have made to the climb through just how you described it. Is that something that you articulated to them? Have you spoken about that? It's
Oh yes, yes. In fact, we are going for our offsite. We do offsites every 6 months. We've not been able to do it in our in the pandemic years. So we are going day after tomorrow for the next 3 nights to a wildlife sanctuary, and we are having so. So when I came back, I did a private, sort of a, what should I say, show or talk for my people. And every single day we will acknowledge, how they have made this possible. I could not have done it if I did not have the freedom. I couldn't be irresponsible towards everything. Thousands of people live off this. My family lives off this. And customers, while they appreciate what I do and my experiences and all of those my adventures, but that cannot be at the cost of running a responsible business, right? I'm responsible for a shipment, I'm responsible for their businesses too. So they will not appreciate if my adventures and my travels mean that my work is faltering, because that is not a substitute, right? So naturally, I have definitely articulated that. And what I was going to say was that the 7 lessons from Everest has become a very, very useful tool, and we are going to now implement this in a more formal way, because we analyze different goals and objectives that we have, and then we map it over the 7 lessons and see which one is missing, why are we not achieving what we wanted to achieve. And over again, no matter what the circumstances are, we can very clearly map it out to say, okay, we are not doing well on this aspect of one of the 7 lessons, and therefore if we can kind of fix this one, we begin to get results. So that management tool is really working, and we are going to be implementing it in a lot more formal way, involving a consultant in the business who takes this over a 9-month intervention, by mapping actual goals over the matrix of the 7 lessons, and then seeing which goal is not fully in place because of missing out on which of the lessons. So Everest is a part of our not only my life but also a part of our businesses, in a way in which it's just there. It's like the air around us, because I think it is something which is helping us to not only feel excited but actually analyze objectively and put our finger down to actual task lists and actual actionables, because that's where the rubber meets the road. Without actual, boiling it down to actual things to be done within a certain time frame, you can't really make a difference. You can keep talking about it.
Yeah. I love that you've incorporated the climb and your book and the seven lessons throughout your organization. And I'm sure you've done it in your family and those around you. That's actually a great segue into the book. So let's talk about your book. I have it right here. It's Seven Lessons from Everest: Expedition Learnings for Life and Business. And I have to tell you, Aditya, this is the most amazing photo essay book, coffee table book that I've ever read. It's it was captivating. 251 pages, over 300, I think 350 photos contained in the book. It really, truly made me feel like I was climbing Everest with you. Of course, without the hypothermia and the oxygen deprivation. Um, but in what I love about the book is that in addition to memorializing your experience on Everest, which you did a fantastic job of, it will be part of your legacy for a very long time because of the pictures that you've taken, because of the way you described your journey. But you took it a step further and you explained how Mount Everest is really just a metaphor for not just, it's a metaphor for any serious challenge or project one takes up in life. And as you referenced, you talk about seven lessons that Everest taught you about life and about business. So let's jump in, if we could, to a couple of those lessons. I'd like to hear more about them. One lesson is the power of focus. And Aditya, you wrote that Everest taught you two kinds of focus are needed: a general one for broad direction and a specific one for every step of the way. Why are these important, and why is it harmful to lack either one, either on the Everest climb or also in life?
So, you know what happens out there and in life in general, whenever we're trying to achieve something which is difficult enough or dangerous enough or challenging enough, there are both negatives and positives around us, right? So when we are, for example, climbing over the ladders over a crevasse, or very very tricky places, 6 inches wide vertical drop on one side, 500 feet into the crevasse or something. So if you look into the dangerous parts and the negatives, then you always will have a situation which either freezes you or just discourages you. Whereas if we can focus only on where we can put our foot and move, then it's not that complicated, because there is the 6 inches. You don't need 6 feet to place a foot, right? You only need 6 inches. But if you're looking for 6 feet, then that's a problem. So that focus of being so focused on the opportunity, that the negatives and the downside, you almost blind to them. They fail to discourage you, they fail to, push you back. So that is the general focus. So if I'm going to climb, if I'm there to climb Mount Everest, and if I'm not putting that in some sort of a context, you know then I will have to understand that, I am there to climb something or do something as huge as climbing the Everest. Then I can't be complaining about small things. I can't be complaining about, your foot getting into the ice or something, like you fall off and you get a hurt or something like that, or something else going wrong, you're having a cough. So that, if that is not in perspective, I think the sensitivity to what you consider as a problem changes. So that is one important aspect for the big picture. And the next step, obviously, so I'll tell you a story. The first time people go through the Kumbu ice fall, which is right in the beginning after the base camp, about 15% people actually give up on the expedition. One night,
15%?
15% of the people actually just turn around. They decide to quit. So about 50 people decide to quit one after one trip to camp one and back, because some of them get sick, some of them decide to not do, this is too dangerous, etc., etc. And I think there is that whole sense of not making a friends with that fear of dying or fear of not succeeding, and two, not having the focus on, like, again, if I'm going through these very treacherous spots, and I'm constantly calculating the dangers of it and constantly worrying about what can happen to me if I fall off or what can happen to me if I slip, then naturally that will completely weigh me down in a very different way. So if my focus on the next step is on the place I can place my foot and go, and not look into the crevice and not look down the wall, I think I should be okay. So that focus actually determines how we react to a situation, because the mountain is the same. 50 people go back, the other 200 carry on. Why? And they've all prepared, they've done their physical preparation, they've paid their money. Nobody just lands up at Everest. I mean, contrary to popular belief, people, it's, well, it is so-called tourism in the death zone. However, I have been there twice and I've met a lot of people, and I don't think there was anybody who was so casual about it that they didn't know what they're getting into. However, as I've said, in other talks, knowing the path and walking the path are two different things. You may know and you may have seen videos, etc., and that's where your experience and your mental stability and your mental tenacity comes in. So, focus determines how we react to situations. If I'm going to be focused on the dangers and all the problems, then I think it will be hard to process so much negativity and still carry on. So that's what I mean by those two kind of focuses.
And related to that, I think, is one step at a time. And you've really hit on a huge goal set. So I am a huge proponent of goal setting. I'm writing a book about goal setting. It's ingrained throughout the fabric of my life. This is such a powerful concept in goal setting. This idea of breaking really big goals into smaller steps. And you talked about the 6 inches, taking that next step. So there's focus required, but it's also breaking down. You don't have to think about the summit. You just need to think about the next step, and then the next step, and then the next step. Aditya, share with us, please, why this is so important in climbing Everest and also in life, and why it's crucial, especially in climbing Everest, to keep moving forward. So as you said, people do turn and go back, but in order to achieve the goal, you have to keep moving forward, right? There is no turning back.
So I would say two things. When you say one step at a time, most important of that happens. Again, you can break that into two parts. So one is the 50-day journey. So one step at a time is going to camp, one coming back, all your rotations and all your acclimatization and all of those things. But finally, it comes down to the summit night. Okay, you've done everything. Now you are at camp 4, and tonight is summit night. And another lesson which I'll just connect here, which says scale should not scare you, right? So the scale of Mount Everest, and if you see the pictures in my book, even on the last night, you've been walking towards the mountain for the last 40 days, and the first time you see it is a speck in the sky, almost like, obviously it's at altitude where planes are flying, and you're like, and you walk and you walk and you walk and you get there, and still on the last night, Brian, it's in your face, it's gargantuan. And now there are no more camps, there is no more going to the next camp and camping, there is to go up to the summit and come back. So I took 24 hours on my last trip. So 6:30 p.m. on the 21st of May, we left camp 4. I reached the summit at 7:30 a.m. in the morning, 13 hours, and on the return it took me 11 hours to come back. Non-stop, there is no place to rest or eat or sleep or whatever. So how does that work? That cannot be a physical thing. I am no extraordinary some ultra marathon runner who can run for 200 miles. And climbing 24 hours of mountaineering in minus 35 Celsius, after having not really slept or eaten, and 40 days of living that high altitude mountain life, you're already at the end of everything that your body can actually offer. But I think if you keep on not always thinking about how much is left, and you just put your head down, and I've experienced this myself, you know one of those things was that you just every foot we were climbing, we were counting between 5 and 7 deep breaths and not looking as to how much is left, but mostly, okay, we just keep going and we keep going and we keep going. And another thing that I want to share with your listeners, and again, you will relate it so much to other experiences in life. And that's why I say Everest is a metaphor. Let's say we have to do something from 0 to 100%. I believe that the first 20-30% is easy because you have the energy of starting up and you're all gung ho and you're all excited and so on. Somewhere around the 30-40% mark, you begin to get tired, you begin to experience your first difficulties. Things go wrong, something when goes wrong in a team or a leader or your health or something else. That's when you begin to start toying with the idea of giving up or turning around or why this is not a good idea and so on. So that stage of a goal between 40 to 80% is the hardest when you have to retain your commitment to the goal, because at that stage the finish line looks far away and the difficulties look very big. And once you are at the 80% mark, then you almost are excited about having, like, you're quite close to the finish line, so you kind of push through even though you're exhausted physically, but mentally something tells you that now you're too close to give up. So between that 40 to 80 is that whole one step at a time story. Because if you keep on processing all the time as to how much time, so after I've climbed 6 hours into the night, if I kept on thinking that I am kind of exhausted within 6 hours and another 8 hours to go only to the top, and then the game is not finished when you reach the top, the game is finished when you come back to camp, right? So reaching the summit of Mount Everest is only half the job done, actually, because your loved ones don't care if you reach the summit. What they really care about is whether you got back home. So
Absolutely.
reaching the top of Mount Everest, they want you to reach, but that's not their main idea. Their main idea that night is that they want you back, and you have to get back
Well,
to life.
and aren't there more casualties going down the mountain than there are going up?
Yes. So a lot of them are mostly are going down. That's again, as I said earlier, because of exhaustion, because of mistakes, because inability to process the information, because you are completely spent. There is, or you run out of something, or you make a wrong decision because of lack of oxygen. You're not processing the decision making. People have unclipped themselves from the rope and walked off the mountain because they're
Is
not.
part of Yeah, is part of that a relaxation might not be the right word, but so you've gotten to the summit, and is there the mistaken impression that that's the hardest part, and so people become just a little bit complacent or a little bit relaxed? Does that contribute to it?
I think that that is a possibility. Although the situation is quite uh, tough out there, and personally, I find it hard to fathom how somebody would think about that kind of a thing, because it's very obvious that you're not home, and it's very obvious that, in fact, the very tricky parts are sometimes much harder on the way down. Because what happens is, on the way up, you have the equipment, the Jumar, which kind of locks you into the rope. So there is a sprocket wheel, and you push it up, and then it locks in, and then you keep on pulling. But when you are going down, there is no locking mechanism, right? So you have to spend your energy and hold on to your footholds, and hand should be holding the rope so tight that you just don't give into gravity. And many places, you are really making a very, very steep, so taking a step up 3 feet up, you're holding on to the rope and you climb yourself. But if you're going 3 feet down in one step at 29,000 feet or 28,000 feet, exhausted and everything. So there is a momentum that the body has. So you kind of, if you just jump and you step down from the table, it's very hard to just stop right there where you step down, because the momentum is carrying you forward, but there is no place to go forward. You're on a vertical climb. So some of those things can go wrong. And energy obviously is very, very precious, but most important is the mental balance. And I think some of those people who, unless it's an accident, it is about not turning around at the right time. It's just about going way over what your body and mind was willing to deal with. But there is this phrase called the summit fever. So it's a very commonly known phrase on Everest. It's called the summit fever. And people are cautioned against it because they don't want to be so wedded to the idea of reaching the top that you completely misassessing the ground reality, what your body is telling you. So that summit fever can be a cause of a lot of accidents because you just overdo it.
Unfortunately, we don't have time to talk about all 7 lessons, but if you have just a few more minutes, if we could talk about one more, and it's make friends with fear. And you actually referenced that. You spoke about it a little bit, but in your book, you wrote that it doesn't matter if you're totally exhausted, dehydrated, freezing, hypoxic, hungry, or anything worse. You must remain super alert and in top performance mode, or you'll pay with your life. That sounds terrifying. Help us to understand. And I have to say, as you were describing going down the mountain, my palms were sweating just a little bit, just thinking about it. But help us to understand what that was like, that terrifying feeling, the multiple times, I'm sure, over the 43 days that you had those feelings, and how you overcame the fear that you certainly must have felt.
So yes, I have to share this, and I'm glad you picked this lesson as the one to talk about, because when I started talking about my journey, nearly every talk, regardless whether the audience was a corporate group or a school kids or a club or whatever else, was like, "Were you not afraid? Were you not scared of all of this?" You go through the slideshow, you go through the videos, and then like, "Are you crazy to be doing this?" And just to voluntarily. So the answer is very simple. That according to me, the risks are basically divided into two baskets: the known risk and the unknown risk. Okay. So the unknown risks are covered in the lesson which is called expect to deal with the unexpected, because those things you cannot plan for. Things will happen. Oxygen ran out, my guide ran away, other things happened. We're not talking about that. The known risks are the ones which are well documented, commonly occurring things which go wrong on Everest: running out of oxygen, getting into frost bites, getting into altitude sickness, getting into this thing called kumbu cough, or things like that. So those are the preparations which I think, when I say making friends with fear, so when I'm friendly with somebody, I'm okay to meet them. I'm happy to sit close to them and have a conversation with them. When I want to avoid somebody, if I'm not friendly with somebody, I don't want to see them, I don't want to deal with them. So I am saying that the fears in a very large and complex project, in this case it is Everest, but it could be anything. If I'm going to take an inventory of those fears and those threats, and tell myself that these are my friends and I'm okay to meet with them, I'm okay to spend time with them, because I cannot really avoid them, they are a known part of the challenge. So I think that when those things happen, they may or may not happen, but if they happen, then we are not panicking, then we are focused, then we already have a preparation and we already know. So like, I was very scared, for instance, on the final night about getting a frostbite, and I'd spoken to senior mountaineers on base camp about like what steps can I take and how can I avoid that. And Brian, in our team, we were four of us. One guy unfortunately was very fit, but he couldn't go beyond camp 4 because he had edema, pulmonary edema issues. So he had to return from camp 4. And the other two of my colleagues, both of them got frostbite. They were hospitalized in Kathmandu upon return. And I was fortunate enough to return in good shape, but I also had very specific steps that I was taking to avoid a frostbite, because I had prepared for that fear of getting a frostbite, to the extent that one of my mittens I actually loaned to my Sherpa because he was feeling cold in his hand. So my right hand was without the major mitten and I was still kind of warm. I had a glove and I had warm clothing, but I didn't have the big thick mitten. So the example I'm giving you is, if I'm going to acknowledge the risks and the fears, it's not about not being afraid of them. It is being comfortable with being afraid, comfortable with encountering them, and then having a plan of action in place. Now, when the plan of action doesn't work or something unexpected happens, that's when the next lesson kicks in, which is expect to deal with the unexpected. So our main guide, look at this. Our main guide who has climbed Everest 7 times, and he was the main reason where we felt safe on being on Everest, safe being on Everest. He just disappeared the final night of the climb. On Camp 4, the final night of the climb, we went without him. We went only with a junior Sherpa because he went with somebody else a day previous because of some financial whatever things happened between them. But imagine the main guide is disappeared, and on my way back, last 6 hours, my personal Sherpa also disappeared. He just walked off, and I just came back alone. Last 6 hours with the last half bottle of oxygen and some water. So unexpected things will happen. So that's that lesson. But making friends with fear of expected risk is a thing which can help us to stay on course, to understand and expect certain things and then deal with them. So that is my lesson, and that is, if you can see how many parallels there are to business projects, to other life projects, you can't be sort of hoping that nothing will go wrong. Of course things will go wrong, and if you're not afraid of anything, then I think you probably will not prepare so well. So fear is a good thing if it is helping us in robust preparation, and that's the
I
whole point.
appreciate that. Yeah, that's a great lesson, Aditya. You maintain that everyone has their own Mount Everest that they were put on Earth to climb. What final advice do you have for our listeners and viewers about discovering their Everest and then applying your lessons from Everest to achieve their goals?
Well, I don't think I'm qualified to give too much advice, but I would just say do it. I mean, basic, as I said, one of the goals and motivations for me to do this out there was to prove what ordinary people can do. And I am about as ordinary as it gets in terms of, comparing it to climbing the Everest. And if I can climb Mount Everest, I really believe anybody can do anything that they decide to do. And of course the lessons kick in, and the first one which we didn't talk about is the preparation plus passion. So passion and preparation come together, and then you can perform at anything. So the first advice is to go for it. Basically, don't keep dilly dallying. If the 50-year-old overweight chap can climb Mount Everest, anybody can do anything. And so that is my only advice: do it. And then if you really decide to do it, I think everything else begins to fall in place.
I appreciate that. I've been so encouraged, Aditya, by our conversation today. So inspired to, I'm not sure I'm inspired enough to go out and sign up to climb Mount Everest, but I'll certainly keep these thoughts and these lessons in our conversation in mind as I pursue my own big dog goals. And I think our listeners and viewers will too. Thank you so much for being on the show. It's been great getting to know you, and I hope we can have another conversation again soon.
It has been my pleasure too, Brian. Thank you very much for having me.
And to our listeners and viewers, if you are as captivated as I've been about Aditya's story, then please visit his website at 7 Lessons from Everest. That's the number 7 Lessons from Everest, where you can learn more about his great adventure on Mount Everest, and most importantly, uh, it's the place where you can grab one or more copies of his book and support the NGO in India, CRY. Thanks for listening to Life Excellence. And until next time, dream big dreams and make each day your masterpiece.